I go now to the other part of the challenge. So the first challenge is the one of literal belief versus post-critical belief. The second challenge I want to deal with is the relation between post-critical belief and relativism. Yeah, that's the second point. And that's then the challenge at the moment that children have shifted from literal belief, leaving literal belief, they often ended up in relativism that is stronger than post-critical belief. So how do we explain the difference between relativism and post-critical belief, which is also a question for adults, and which will become more and more a question in the coming decades. Again, we will not do this through theory. We'd like to show you also how we work with teams of teachers in schools. One of the practical theological instruments we are developing in this project are the so-called issue explorations. Issue explorations. What does that mean? We have an issue, we propose an issue to a team of teachers, for example, and then we invite them to reflect how people with these different cognitive belief styles, how they would respond to that issue. So you learn to know the patterns to react and to learn the different patterns to distinguish. We have brought with us two different such issue explorations. The first is the one on Coca-Cola. You will see that Coca-Cola will play an important role today. We are not sponsored by them, but it's interesting to see how Coca-Cola deals with its identity, to learn about it for Catholic identity. Good. The first issue, I will first read the issue, and Jan will then read the different responses. It's a real case. Yeah?
A group of students from the 6th grade who are to receive the sacrament of confirmation during a Mass at our Catholic school were encouraged to think of ways to make the ceremony more relevant to their daily lives. Their most striking proposal was to replace the sacramental wine with Coca-Cola. We are not allowed to drink wine because we are too young, they argued, while Coca-Cola is our daily drink.
Okay. So the exercise is now, how would someone in literal belief, in external critique, in relativism, and in post-critical belief respond to such a situation? Imagine that this happens in the pastoral theme in your school. How would you respond to this case? Your response tells something about your cognitive belief style. Yeah. So Jan we have made the exercise ourselves. Jan will show you the answer for each of the four as we have prepared them, how the mindset of the literal believer would work in such a context.
A literal believer would say, I find this proposal ludicrous and even blasphemous. How dare these children even ask? Without wine, the Eucharist would simply be not valid. If they have no respect for the church tradition, they should not to be admitted to confirmation at all.
That's very clear, isn't it? Okay. Good.
External critique would respond as such.
External critique?
To me, it's equally meaningless, regardless whether you use Coca-Cola, wine, or water. I don't think most of these students believe in it anyway. In my experience, they only go to confirmation to please their grandmas and to receive presents.
That's also clear.
A relativistic answer should be, what a fun and creative idea. It is an expression of the children's individual conviction, and that is what really matters. If they are willing to believe that Christ can be present in a cup of cola, it is just the same as them thinking that he is present in wine, wouldn't it be?
Okay, relativism, it's all the same.
And then the PCB answer.
Before he starts, you see the problem? What's the problem? You need 2 times space to formulate an answer. It shows the complexity of post-critical belief. So, Jan?
I am pleased that the students find sacraments important enough to engage with them critically. However, the Eucharist needs to be rooted in historical tradition as well as in the daily lives of believers. From the beginning, bread and wine have been crucial elements in this sacrament. Letting go of the wine runs the risk of rendering the symbol unintelligible and no longer related to the person of Christ. Still, the children are right that the Mass should also be linked to their experiences. Perhaps they can make that connection in some other creative way. For example, offering something from their daily lives together with the bread and the wine.
Okay. You see, typical to post-critical belief is that you are aware of the impact and the meaning of the symbols as authentic mediations of the divine, which cannot just be replaced by others, because they refer to a reference. In that case, the original Eucharist and the person of Christ. And that awareness cannot be relativized. And that's typical for what happens in post-critical belief. It does not mean that you cannot add elements to it, but the mediation itself has to be, in some way, clearly respected. But you see, it is not by rejecting the proposal of the students, but in entering into dialogue with that position. You see here the difference between relativism, where symbols can easily be replaced by other symbols, and on the other hand, post-critical belief, where the symbols refer to a symbolized, and that reference itself cannot be relativized. And that's very typical for post-critical belief. Symbols refer to the symbolized. And if you start relativizing this, you will undermine the Catholic identity of your schools. And that happens at the moment that your staff gets in the PCB scale a higher result on relativism than on post-critical belief. If you have a shift, even a small shift, it's enough to start a process of hollowing out from within the Catholic identity. That's the reason why we say it's important, that will be the final conclusion of this morning lecture, to take into account the importance of the reference to which symbols refer. Sometimes if I tell to my children stories from the Bible, and they ask me to explain, and I say, yeah, you have to explain it symbolically, then they say, oh, it's our only symbols. So symbols in our culture have become something weak. But in fact, symbols are something very strong, because symbols are mediators. They refer to something. Like my wedding ring refers to something real for me, not an interpretation of reality, not a construction. It refers to love, and not love in extracto, but love for that woman and for that marriage. It has a reference. So we should be careful that symbols do not become in the grasp of relativism. That's the introduction to the second example we have with us, speaking about wedding rings. A burglar stole my wedding ring. Imagine. How would you respond to such a situation? How would someone in literal belief respond, Jan? Have a look, listen very carefully.
Literal believing person might say, I am so sad and angry that my wedding ring is stolen. What fiendish person will do such a thing? This was the ring that my wife gave to me at our wedding. It has great value and is irreplaceable. Being separated from my ring, our bond of marriage itself seems to be damaged. I'm going to go to the police at once to report the theft. I count on them to catch the thief and retrieve the ring.
You see, in literal belief, the ring cannot be replaced by something else. Yeah? It's the ring in the literal sense of the word that represents the marriage. It's a hard proof of it. What will an external critique say?
I didn't wear that ring anymore anyway. It may just as well be gone. To be honest, I don't really understand my wife and daughter's hysteria about the significance of a piece of metal. Let's be clear, I hate thieves, but I am more upset they took our stereo as well.
You're not very nice for external critique. Okay? The relativist. Yeah, what will he say?
What a pity. I was rather fond of that ring, but hey, it's not the end of the world. In fact, I saw a gorgeous golden ring at a jewelry store the other day. I will ask my partner to present it to me during our cruise in the Caribbean next summer to celebrate good times. I am not too upset about the lost wedding ring. After all, unmarried couples in a common law relationship don't wear rings either, although they do love each other too. There are many ways to show affection.
Okay, you see the replaceability of every worldview by another, and a kind of friendly, formal tolerance, yeah, towards different expressions of love. Again, post-critical belief, more lines to explain.
My wedding ring means a lot to me. I am very sad that it is stolen, because for my husband and I, it is an irreplaceable symbol of our love in marriage. However, we realize that what matters is not the ring itself, but what it refers to, our eternal love for each other. Therefore, we should search creatively for new ways to symbolically express our love, in line with our history as a couple. Perhaps we could once more present each other our engagement rings, along with a love letter and our favorite flower. We could have the new old rings consecrated and renew our marriage vows at the occasion of the baptism of our youngest daughter. Perhaps something good can come from this loss.
Okay, it's difficult to write this because you have to distinguish it both from relativism and from literal belief. Yeah? So you distinguish it from relativism because you are hurt by the fact that the ring is lost. Yeah. You still give a meaning to the original ring, and you try to find continuity with the history. And that's also what happens in post-critical belief. On the other way, you will try to renew it and not put it in a kind of police approach in some way of the whole topic. So we use this to show to people, if they reflect on their ring, that if you lose your marriage ring, it's not so simple to replace it by something else. It does matter that our love, that our belief refers to something real, an ontological reference. Yeah? On the other hand, we also know that the original reference, you could say the ring of our faith, is lost. We don't have Jesus available for us today. We have the Bible. But the Bible, that's 4 Gospels. That's already 4 stories on the same Jesus. Already 4 different interpretations of Jesus. We cannot go back to the beginning. So we need these mediations to relate to the divine. We need these 4 Gospels. We need them all 4, to understand how Jesus appears to us. So what is typical for post-critical belief is that you create a community with a history, an institution, rituals, sacraments, texts, prayers, that enable us to encounter, through that amount of mediations, try to encounter that divine, even if the original ring is also not present, but only made present through several forms of mediation. And we need a magisterium to reflect on the authenticity of the process of the renewal of our mediations. And there will always be, and there should be, a tension between the process of renewal from bottom up on the one hand, and the reflection, the critical reflection on it, of those who are concerned that in that process the authenticity of the reference to the ring is guaranteed. That's the difference between post-critical belief and relativism. A question we often get is the question, can you do this with children? Big question. So often our education is imprisoned in the idea that children are not able to act, to think, to experience hermeneutically and that only teenagers are able to do it. So that means we initiate children in literal belief, sometimes also out of anxiety to hidden our own relativism, and then we open them up as teenagers to start to communicate. At the moment they are no longer interested in religion because religion became associated with literal belief. Some people say that it's impossible to do it in another way because children are not able to think post-critically. We are really fighting against that idea. We think it is possible not only to philosophize, but also to theologize with children. We have empirical proof for that. I asked Jan in our data set of, I think that's about 20,000 people in Australia, if we could find the profile of children and teenagers with a positive score on post-critical belief and a moderately positive score on literal belief. Yeah? You know, our yellow bubble in the PCB scale is high post-critical belief on the one hand, and it is a moderate literal belief on the other hand. We did find them in your schools. To give you just an idea, we find them in the primary schools among the students grade 5 and 6. We find them in 13% of the students. 13%. Yeah. So these are students with a high PCB in combination with, still a quite high literal belief, but in a beautiful, mature profile. So they are in mediating faith, but they refer to the reference, 13%. We find them in grade 7 and 8, same profile in almost 13% of the students. We find them in grade 9 and 10. So for example, grade 9 and 10, these are 487 students on 4,800 students, who are able to think in a post-critical way. If you go to grade 11, 12, where you have, of course, more relativism in general, we find 382 on 3,341 students that are able to come to post-critical belief. Yeah? So, what we want to say is they exist. They exist already. You have not to ask, is it possible? They exist. They are in the schools. The question is only how can you improve, empower this way of dealing with religion, where the literal belief and the drop-off of the literal belief is not paid by a drop-off of post-critical belief. And this brings me again in a kind of summary to the concept of the ontological reference. The ontological reference. Now, the ontological referent is in fact God. That's what we mean with the person, the belief in a personal transcendent God, to which we relate and who enters in our hermeneutical space. You could say in literal belief, the presentation of the relation with God is that you have a community that is quite closed and that has some ways to have an immediate, direct access to God. For example, the Protestant or evangelical sola scriptura. Only and direct through the scripture you unmediated, you can meet God in the literal reading of the words. It's an example of such a direct availability of God, unmediated. It also happens with some charismatic movements where through the emotion you have a direct, unmediated contact with God through some rituals of the community. The second is external critique. Yeah, Jan put there NA, it means not available. Yeah, so there is no transcendent reality. There is no reference outside of the immanent reality. So for the person in external critique, the wedding ring is a piece of metal. Yeah? He has no symbolic sensitivity. Thirdly, The person in relativism has many mediations, but for him or her, they are just interchangeable experiences of immanent transcendence that does not refer to an ontological reference. Yeah? So you see, you have sports, you have Christianity, you can even have Star Trek as your religion. Yeah? Music or arts or mindfulness. You can experience all these things at the same time or consecutively, but they do not refer to a relation with a personal transcendent God. Okay, that's the third one. So the first one, you have a direct availability. Second one, you have no transcendent reality. The third one is a pure divergent hermeneutical space. And now we have also tried, and that's very difficult, to put in a graph post-critical belief. Yeah? You will see we need again more science to explain it. It means post-critical belief also asks for formation, for training, for theological education. And we know that the more people have an education, the more post-critical belief is enabled. Yeah? What is PCB belief looks like? Of course, there you have the reference, God, referring to the Old Testament, where God is, as you know, the Tetragrammaton, where God is Yahweh. And you know what is typical to the divine name of God in Hebrew? Typical is that we do not spell out
Vowels.
the vowels. Yeah. The vowels are not written. It's even not allowed to pronounce his name. If there would be a Jew here, that would have been blasphemy. We say Adonai, we don't say Yahweh. This expresses, in fact, in Judaism, that God is transcendent. That we have not a direct available God. That God is also absent. That God is also the one who is apophatic, we say in theology. Negative. You can only say what God is not. It's that God we confess. That transcendent God, but as Christians, of course, and that's different from Judaism, that God revealed himself in the person of Jesus. Even more, that God is Trinitarian. That God is 3 and 1. That means in the heart of God himself there is communication. The love of God is also an inner Trinitarian God between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. To understand and to experience these things needs initiation. Needs a space where this can happen. Needs a language. So what is a Catholic school? A Catholic school, in our understanding, is a community, not a closed, but an open community that offers to young people and to teenagers and to adults a context of strong mediations that are presented respectfully, not in the curve box, respectfully, and that comes from within the church and from outside of the church. You see what is there? Mary, sacraments, saints, the magisterium, rituals, but also the human experience, the sciences, ethics, aesthetics, are all experiences that in some way converge and that make God available through mediation. They refer to a point, but the point I can never catch. That's why I need always to come back to the church, come back to the sacred space, to time and again encounter through these mediations in a strong place the presence of God. And why is Eucharist so central in the Catholic identity of the school? Because in the Eucharist, we believe that we create, or we have received, is better, we have received a hermeneutical space that opens itself, and of which Catholics believe that this place is so pure, is so strong that not we create the presence of God, but God breaks through the barrier and makes himself present, really present, through the symbols in our meeting. And that's why Eucharist is, of course, constitutive for the identity of every Catholic school. But not only the Eucharist, and not the Eucharist understood as a kind of mechanical automatism that produces God like it is presented in the first sheet. I come to my conclusion for this lecture. It's almost 12 o'clock. I like to end with this image of post-critical belief. It's a crucifix they put in a church, but the crucifix is made from glass. Made from glass. And you see the glass windows at the back, and it's the sun and the light that comes through the glass windows, that comes from the world in the church, that makes appear the church, the crucifix, time and again in another way. It means in some way that each time we come in the church, based on our own experiences of light and darkness, typical for our own hermeneutical space, we are able to encounter, and each time to encounter again, the divine presence in the cross. It would be my hope that schools does not stuck children and their hermeneutical space in literal thinking. It is moreover my hope that Catholic schools will not leave children and young people along with a relativism in dealing with the hermeneutical space, but that we enable them, that we initiate them, that we educate them, that through the mediations we offer, they can experience the richness of life, the richness of the cross, and the salvific promise of the cross in their hermeneutical space. I thank you for your attention.